Welcome to Dreamers to Leaders, Keeping It Real with Melody podcast. Melody is a born dreamer who started from being a flight attendant and worked her way up into now a tech fashion trendsetter, thought leader, and seasoned entrepreneur in multiple successful ventures. This podcast is for the awakened dreamer. Industry icons will share their humble beginnings up to the leaders they are today. Let's all learn and be inspired. Together, we can all prosper.
Hello and welcome to the Dreamers to Leaders podcast. It's the podcast for the dreamers, but more importantly, the doers. I'm your host, Melody. Today, we're excited to talk about an upcoming film that is currently in contention for the Oscars. But more importantly, it tackles a critical, socially relevant topic. What better way to talk about this film than to have the filmmaker here with us? He's also a recipient of the Panavision's Future Filmmaker Award, among other accolades and award that he has, which we will for sure post in this episode. So ladies and gentlemen, please, let's welcome Emil Gallardo. Hi, Emil.
Hey, Melody. How's it going?
It's going. So let's start. If you could share with our audience, and if you could take us back to the time that you were starting out as a filmmaker, how was it like? What were your struggles and challenges, and how did you overcome those?
Yeah. So growing up, I thought I was going to be a writer. I've just always been writing stories my whole life since I was a little kid. And I didn't even go to school that much. I wasn't like a good student or anything, but I just always had these stories that I needed to tell. So I thought I was going to go that route. And then when I was in my early 20s, I was kind of lost, not sure what I wanted to do. Grew up in LA, but didn't grow up with any connections to the film industry. Didn't grow up with a camera, didn't have a rich uncle, nothing like that. So I just decided like, okay, well, this is something that I'm interested in. Let me see what it's all about. So I found a Craigslist ad for an entry-level position for a PA. Applied to that, got an interview, went through the whole interview process. And then at the end, the guy I was interviewing with said, are you comfortable with nudity? And I thought he was talking about me. And I'm like, well, I don't know if I want to like explore this industry that much. I was like, I don't know. And he's like, no, like not you, on the other side of the camera. And I said, oh, okay, I guess. So sure enough, I find my way onto a softcore porn set as one of a handful of PAs. So it all kind of started there for me. And to answer your question, as far as struggles, I mean, the first struggle was just, I didn't know anything. I didn't know a single thing about filmmaking. I didn't know any roles. I didn't know what the departments were. I didn't know what they did. I didn't know what it took to make a show or a film. And then I remember feeling like, wow, like, I grew up in LA and I'm Mexican, and, like so much of Los Angeles is Latino. And then here I am in this industry and there's no one. All these people had come from all over the country and some even the world. And like, I just felt like a fish out of water, and I had never been in an environment like that. And like I said, I didn't know anything. So I was just kind of figuring out everything on my own from scratch and trying to figure out how to get to where I wanted to go. So those were my first kind of struggles, just kind of navigating the whole industry and politics and hierarchy.
Not knowing anyone in the industry. I'm curious, Emil, what was the ad? What did the ad say that prompted you to call and follow that lead?
This was this was in 2002, maybe 2003. So I just remember feeling like, it probably said something to the effect of no experience needed, because I felt comfortable applying. And, it was a complete entry-level position. Most of my job that first week consisted of making sure so we were filming. So it was a whole series for Cinemax, a softcore series. And so we were there in this mansion in Bel Air for 3 weeks. And so we had to put these big sheets of cardboard down on the floors to protect the mansion from getting scraped up by all of us. And so inevitably the stands and high heels and everything would puncture it. So my job was to go by and either tape it up or replace the cardboard. And so it was like as entry level as you get. Like if you can spot a hole and patch a hole, like you're qualified. So Uh, so it's probably something to that effect.
Did you have so for our audience, PA is production assistant, right?
Yeah, sorry, it's a production assistant, which is just it's just kind of whatever the production needs. So if you need to replace cardboard, if you need, another hard drive, if you need to go get, lunch for somebody because they have a specific diet, or it's just anything the production needs, you're there to assist. So it's kind of anything and everything that's needed. So yeah.
With regards to that ad, did it say anything about filmmaking or anything with regards to the film industry, anything like that? Or it was just...
Yeah. I mean, I knew I was trying, I was looking for stuff related to film because I was trying to just kind of poke my head into this world and see what it was all about. So it definitely mentioned, it said it was a production assistant. I knew what a production assistant was. So, and then in my interview, we talked a lot about that, and I knew it was going to be multiple weeks. And so it seemed like, it served my purposes of like, let me get on a set and kind of figure out what's what. And then sure enough, I remember that first day, and I got there and I was like, this is like, I feel like, I feel like I'm home. Like, I feel like this is where I belong. And yeah, the content, I eventually left softcore. The content wasn't the perfect fit, but the environment, the camaraderie, the rigorousness. I mean, even in softcore, you're shooting like a ton of material per day. So the department that I went into is all logistical. So we had to quickly figure out like, how are we going to make our schedule every single day and execute our plan? And so there was a lot I fell in love with really quickly. And I just knew like, this is where I belong. So
even today, porn industry is still considered taboo, for a lot of people.
For sure.
How do you break it to your family that that's kind of your first job, or that's the career, or that's the job that you have? Like, hey, it's 9 o'clock, I'm gonna go to work.
Yeah, I don't know how much I told them at first. They just knew I was working a lot, and then I did that for a few months, and then I remember Jamie, who was the head of the production company. They filmed other stuff as well, but their like deal with Cinemax, I think, was kind of their bread and butter. And I remember sitting down with Jamie one day and saying like, I can't work on this stuff anymore. And it was a hard conversation because they treated us well, and I was learning a lot, and I got to do a lot of different things. But I remember just telling her like, it's not for me, and I need to kind of leave. So yeah, I wasn't there that long. It was, I don't know, 6 to 12 months probably until I left that industry completely and then got into other stuff. But I don't think I ever had that conversation with my family. And it wasn't, I mean, it was softcore. So they're naked, but they're legally not allowed to have sex. And we would physically prevent them. Like the guys had to wear a nylon, the ladies had to wear like a big bandage. And sometimes they would get kind of caught up in the moment and we'd have to cut. And we're like, hey guys, just a reminder. Well, first we saw you, take your little sock off. And second, like legally, we're not, regulated for that. And, so it wasn't too extreme, but
with the COVID and the pandemic, I don't know what's ever going to happen.
Yeah. This was way before all that. Yeah.
Have your face shield. And,
yeah. Yeah.
Imagine.
Yeah.
But, there was this data, I think it was the Pediatric Journal, where it talked about pornography, which is, it's saying that around 42% of children ages 10 to 17 have already been exposed to video pornography. So I don't know if that's soft porn or what have you. During your 6 to 12 month stint in that industry, did you form any opinion about that industry, about that field?
Yeah. Funny. I've never been asked that. I remember, I don't know how graphic you want to get, but stop me if I'm going too far. But I remember one day I'm driving a passenger van. I'm PA on the same show, and I have to take these two actors back to the parking lot where their cars are. And so I'm just driving this van, and you know, it holds like 16 people, but it's just the two of them in the back. And so they're having this conversation kind of as if I'm not there. And I remember the male actor saying to the female one, you know, I really need to stop getting upset with my girlfriend just because she's giving jobs every day. Like, it's her job, but it's my job too. And I really need to get control of that because it's really stressing me the out. And I was sitting there like, wow, all right, this is like just driving, and I like try not to look in the mirror and like look at her reaction. And they're just having this very normal conversation. And I just realized like, it's just so different than how I thought, and kind of, you know, what the norms were for me in my relationship at the time. And I think the biggest thing was just, I don't fully understand all of the experiences and how the people that, you know, are on that side of the camera, how they see everything and the experiences that they've had that have kind of brought them to that viewpoint. So it's more like, I don't understand, because like a lot of times, you know, we become very desensitized very quickly because there's just naked people around you constantly, and they don't care. Like, it's not a big deal to them. They'll walk around naked until it's time to shoot, and then they'll put on a bikini and hop on set. And like, because they don't seem to mind, it becomes like normal, like just like furniture in the room. Like, it's not anything enticing because it doesn't feel like it's private. So I remember that feeling a lot.
Right?
What's that?
Becomes work, it becomes a chore.
Yeah.
You know, interesting you brought up that you get desensitized, and at the same time,
yeah,
on the other end of those of the viewers, they, you know, there is a high statistics of addiction, you know, pornographic addiction, that apparently is a sign of depression and you know, loneliness, anxiety, so on and so forth. So there's really a lot of things that go on with that industry.
It's a different world. It's a different world because then you spend like 16 hours a day on the crew, just surrounded by naked people having like simulated sex. And then you come home to your partner, and it's just weird. It's like, because you have been so desensitized, and sex is like entertainment all day long, and it's so like fabricated. And so it does kind of, I mean, just speaking for myself, I'm not trying to represent the whole crew.
Yes,
we never talked about this.
Just a real raw opinion of
Yeah. So for me, it definitely desensitized me very quickly, because it's your job. And, you know, I remember I'm like doing a call sheet, you know, in a garage, you know, while they're shooting in the house on my laptop. And then there's somebody who's 100% naked having a conversation about, so what time is my scene? And I'm like, oh, let me check. Okay, it looks like you're going to be up in 30 minutes. And I'm like trying to make eye contact, you know, like, so it's a different work environment for sure.
So with regards to your life as a filmmaker now, what truly inspired you, Emil, to get in this industry?
To me, it always comes back to the stories. And I, you know, we can leave softcore as a topic, but that was part of the reason why it wasn't right for me, is like, we weren't making stories that we were all excited about. And for me, it comes down to empathy. I feel like stories are an amazing way to create empathy, because you can take the audience and just drop them into your main character's shoes. And, you know, if we were to have a conversation, I could tell you what it's like to grow up in LA, and, you know, you could kind of imagine, but in a film, it's so immersive. It's such an immersive art form. It has music, it has, you know, your camera, your lenses, your actors, you know, you name it, like locations, editing. I mean, there's so many different components. Yeah, and there's so many different like tools as a filmmaker that you have to create an experience. And not to knock like a novel or anything like that, but in a novel, you still have a story, and the viewer is imagining what they're reading and what it looks like and what these characters sound like, and are they tall, are they short, are they old, you know, like there a lot is left to their imagination, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. And in a film, you get to create the whole environment, everything they see, everything they hear. And so for me, it's that transporting the viewer into a situation, into a world, into a character's shoes. That's probably a lot different than them. And then by the end of the film, now they have a perspective that they didn't have before. And I just am addicted to that. That's what I'm addicted to.
So with regards to your journey as a filmmaker, was there anything that stand out in terms of biggest disappointment, biggest failure or mistake, if you could call it that, that you would consider your biggest learning, biggest teaching moment? Is there anything like that, Emil?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm learning constantly. As a director, I've made several mistakes. And so one thing I do at the end of every project is I make a very objective list of everything that went well, everything that didn't, and then what I want to correct going into the next one. And it's like not even ruthless because there's no judgment. It's just very objective. So, and it includes myself, obviously, but it's everything, like everything I can think of. This went well, this went well, this went well, these didn't. And so, you know, then I go back and I look at that, like I do it immediately after, and then leading up into the next production, I'll look at that just to refresh myself. So there's been a ton of things, I think, and I'm kind of a person that learns. It's going to sound weird, but I learn through pain. I mean, the mistakes that I've made, I really don't enjoy them. They sting and they stay with me, and I really don't like them. So it's not that I don't think I'll make future mistakes, but I hope not to repeat them. So for me, a lot of it is around moments I've missed or not being open enough to what was happening then and there. Like, because I'm also a writer, you know, we've kind of carefully constructed a story in all these moments and beats. And then, you know, in production, I'm trying to bring them to life. Mm-hmm. But I think sometimes I've made the mistake of I'm not as present as I need to be to catch what's actually happening right then and there. And so I'll give you an example. In 1, 2, 3, when the class comes into the second classroom, we had stopped the kids from going into that location until we were ready to film them, because we actually wanted to get their real reaction to the space that they hadn't seen before. And so they come into the room and we're filming, and they sit down, and, you know, I'm behind the monitor watching all this. And I remember a little boy, he's sitting on the floor, and there's all these like empty shell casings, and he picked one up, and, you know, these are AR-15 blank, like fired shell casings. And he's looking at it with just this like curiosity, and the human in me was active, and I'm like, stop it, like put that down, what are you doing? It's not a toy. And I was also worried he was going to stick it in his pocket and take it home, and his parents were going to find it later and freak out. And so I just immediately like shut it down. And then afterwards I was like, wow, that's such an amazing moment, because it's saying kind of everything I want to say in one moment. It's this innocence meeting this like ridiculous, awful violence, and those two things should never coincide. And yet in this moment it is. And that image said all that in that one, and his just genuine curiosity. And we could have filmed it, but it wasn't written. I didn't think of that. I wasn't anticipating these kids would be fascinated by bullets, you know? And so it's the moments like that where it's like, oh, if I had just stayed a little more receptive to what's actually happening, then we could have captured that, and that moment could have been in the film, but I didn't, and I didn't catch it till afterwards. So that all goes in my kind of list of things. And so it's just a reminder to stay present, stay connected, stay open.
Always
you can
be
still
ready,
have,
right?
what's that?
And always be ready.
Be ready for like, for authenticity. And that was a real moment. And I mean, to our credit, like we did capture a lot of real moments too. But as far as mistakes, you know, that's one of them that I just like, and it just came out of being a little too fixated on our plan, you know.
Let me just piggyback on what you said about pain, you know, how pain is you. And you also talked about writing. So I actually wrote a piece of article that has something to do with, you know, what is the upside to the pandemic downtime, right?
Right.
Talks about, I mean, the intro was pain, using pain as an intriguing currency.
Mhm.
That, for some people, and it's just the perspective, for some people, they use pain as something that would let them go deep down a hole that is really hard for them to claw up. And others, they use it to really help them propel to better themselves. So that's an interesting point that you brought up. In terms of advice, Emil, for our audience who want to get into the industry, is there maybe one or two things that you would want to maybe share with our audience?
Yeah, and again, my advice is coming from my life experience. So with this industry, there is no one path. It's not like if you wanted to be a lawyer or a doctor and there's very specific steps that you need to take. That doesn't exist. So for one, I think would be having that expectation that there is no specific one path. So your story is going to be different, and what worked for one person may not work for you. But my first thing, especially to like younger emerging filmmakers, would be, even if you want to be a director or a writer, having actual production experience is invaluable. And I see this all the time. Like, I read a ton of scripts now, and I know a ton of screenwriters now, and a lot of them have never been on set. And so when I'm reading their script, I can tell that this is a story, but it's not necessarily, because a script isn't the final product. It's not like a novel where, that is the story, that's what the consumer consumes, right? Like a screenplay is a blueprint for a film. And so I think the more production experience you have in a variety of departments, even if your goal is to be a writer or a director or both, knowing how to take a script and transform it into the final product that the viewer consumes will only make your writing and directing stronger. So my first piece of advice would just be, find a way to get on set. It kind of doesn't matter what department at first. You're going to figure it out. Like, you're going to start to gravitate towards what you naturally like to do and where your skill set brings you. So find a way on set and just take some time to experiment and play and try different departments. Like, do you like sound? Do you like camera? Do you like wardrobe? Do you like makeup? Do you like the production department, craft services? Like, you name it, there's a whole variety of things to do. So, and even if that's not your end goal, just spending time with each one or getting deep in one is only going to make you a better filmmaker. And I feel like so many people are just like, they rush to jump into their ultimate thing, but they miss all that information along the way. And I think
that's very important, to be a well-rounded professional in any field. It's good to start from other angles as well, and really have your hands dirty and go down the trenches on what it's like in the other parts of the business, rather than just being in one track part of the whole scheme of things, right?
Yeah, and I would say, I think that there's a misconception, and I'm just speaking for myself. I had this. I think that we think of a director as like just a storyteller, like, oh, I'm here to tell people what to do to create this story. And I think so much of your job is to be a motivator. And, production, you're shooting anywhere from 10 to like 18 hours sometimes in a day. How do you keep people motivated on hour 17? And they got to be back tomorrow in 10 hours. You know what I mean? Like, so much of your job is to motivate, and it's a whole variety of personalities. So the more that you've been there, that was you at one point, the more you're able to speak their language and get them to still give you their best on hour 12, 13, 14, 15, throughout the duration of your project. So that's as much a part of the job as anything else.
I think that also goes back to what you said a moment ago regarding empathy. So
Right.
That's the only way that you could empathize if you
Right.
somehow
Right.
you've been in their shoes, right? And I also like the part where, Julie, as a leader and as a director, you're really there to orchestrate and lead, but there's no follower if you can't lead. You're not
Exactly.
motivating, right?
Exactly. And film is, I mean, you're like a conductor with an orchestra, right? Like you have all these people that are very good and very specialized.
Right.
Like if it's the orchestra analogy, you have your, oh God, I'm gonna, my lack of knowledge of an orchestra is about to be revealed, but you have all your individual musicians, right? And your job is to kind of bring them all together to create something harmonious.
Exactly.
So that's the job. And so if you've been in their seat, then you're like, okay, I know what it's like, and you can speak to that. So yeah, totally.
So Emil, in terms of being a filmmaker, is there like an overarching philosophy that you have in doing your craft?
For me or for the industry or
For you as a filmmaker,
yeah, I absolutely do. The story comes first, and I'm like super passionate about it. And again, I'm speaking for myself. I don't, there's a whole variety of films, and I'm not knocking anybody for liking whatever they like. That's great. But for me, the story comes first. And what I mean by that is I think a lot of people, they get caught up in like, oh, this explosion would be cool, or if we could see more cleavage, or if they were covered in blood or whatever, like these or this really elaborate camera move, and they get like very kind of, I don't know, caught up in these sensational things. And for me, it's like, sure, we could have all of those things if they push the story forward. And so to me, anything that overpowers or detracts from the story, and a really common example would be like the score in a film where the music is so heavy that you're like, okay, like there's no subtlety to this. It's telling me what to feel. It's become overpowering. And I've now been pulled out of the story because the music is so overpowering. And you see the same thing with camera moves. You'll see the same thing with a performance where you have a variety of people in a scene, and then you just have one actor that's just like so dominant. And again, going back to the orchestra analogy, you want to blend. And to me, it's blending all of these things, the lighting, the camera, the costumes, the actors, the dialogue, all of these things. So to me, the story comes first. The story is always we're going to always defer to what is best for the story. That dictates so many different answers.
Listening to you, and then having the privilege to watch the film, I truly could see that. I could truly see that in your work, where you really allowed the story to really pop. It's not about, you really could get immersed in the story. So let's talk about your film, 1, 2, 3, All Eyes on Me. Why the title, Emil?
So the title came out of an interview. So we did several interviews with different teachers, and so my writing partner, shout out to Derek. We get it. We debate like pretty much everything. So I remember one call, we were like, well, what would the teacher say to get the class's attention? And one of us was like, they'd be like, hey class. And I'm like, no, they're not just say, hey class. So, yeah. So we had like this ongoing list of just like questions for the next interview. And so I wrote it down. When you want to get your class's attention, what do you say? And so I was talking to one teacher out on the East Coast, and she was mentioning these different phrases. She's an art teacher. Shout out to Cher. And she was saying, well, we'll say Mona and then Lisa. Like I'll say Mona and the class will say Lisa. Or I'll say peanut butter, they'll say jelly. And then she said, 1, 2, 3, all eyes on me. And they'll say 1, 2, all eyes on you. And I just remember I heard it, and I'm taking notes the whole time. And I just like, wait a minute, like I think that's the title. And then I brought it back to Derek and we talked about it, and it just felt like, I won't give away too much, but it kind of takes on multiple meanings in the film, including kind of like a lot of what we are trying to say is like, all this entire situation has fallen on the shoulders of one person, and all eyes are on her, and we don't feel like that's right. Like, this isn't what she signed up for. This shouldn't all come down to one person. These situations shouldn't exist. And so it just had multiple meanings for us. And and then I've had lots of teachers who are like, wait a minute, like, what is this movie about? Like, this is the phrase that I use. And then they watch it, and I think, it's not hard for them to imagine themselves there. And
Yeah, and that's really part of your the art and the skills that you really have put in here, Emil. With regards to what prompted you to write this film? What was your trigger point?
First it was just feeling like we need to do more about this. Like, we understand this on an intellectual level. Like, we know that these scenarios happen, but for some reason there's a disconnect, and like, I don't know if we're becoming numb as a society to this or what, but like, we need to take the audience into the situation and make them feel what it would be like. So that was there. I mean, that's been there. Just whenever these things arise, I ask myself, like, how can I help contribute to ending this? But the trigger point was a cell phone video that I had seen. And in the video, there's guys shooting at one another outside of this classroom. And the kids are very young. And the teacher asks all the kids to get on the ground. And so the kids get on the ground. And then she says to them, will you sing with me? And she starts singing to them. And then one by one, she's calling their names and saying, please sing with me, please sing with me. And I remember, and it's a shaky little cell phone video. And I remember watching that and just feeling like she's so consumed by protecting them in every imaginable way. She's not only protecting them physically, but emotionally. And never is she giving a thought to herself or her own well-being. And I was so inspired by her courage. I mean, that's genuine courage and selflessness. And I felt like we needed to tell a story about a person like that.
I think it was a data that shows out of like only 5% of the world's population are Americans, and yet 42% or some ridiculous number of mass shooting comes from America. Why do you think is that, Emil? What do you think is the root to that? You think it's mental health, or is there really a mental health issue that is so staggering here in the United States, or is it gun control? I don't know. I was just hoping that perhaps while doing the film that came about as to what the heck, why is this so astonishing in terms of kind of the of how it's just escalating. So apparently 2018 there were 323 or some number as to how many mass shootings, and then 2019 it went up to 400 some, and then 2020, of course, with the pandemic, you would expect it to also spike up. So it's now in the upwards of 580 mass shooting, and recently, 2 days ago? Was it 2 days ago?
Where they had in Nashville.
Yes. So so I don't know, is it mental health? Is it gun control? But hopefully, of course, that's where your film will hopefully come in and just kind of have this debate, right? Just have this discussion with people.
I mean, so I'm not an expert. I don't have a perfect answer. I don't think it's any one thing. I think first, just speaking as a man myself, I think not just in the US, and we'll get to additional factors, but definitely in the US, as a male, we are taught that we are not supposed to express our emotions. Think about all the little boys you've seen. They get hurt, they start crying. Somebody inevitably tells them, stop acting like a little girl, like suck it up, stop it. You're a big boy now, stop crying, stop feeling sorry for yourself. And so the one kind of emotion that we are allowed to express is anger. and violence. Like, you might get punished for violence, but nobody looks at you like you're less of a person. It's just like, hey, you shouldn't have hit that kid. You know, you're going to get suspended, but you don't come back to school as like less of a man or less of a boy. So we are taught that like it is okay for us to express anger, but not vulnerability, not sadness, not weakness, not fear, not embarrassment, all these other things. Men, that's not what a man is.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's that, but I think that applies, you know, in many places of the world.
Right.
But you take those values and that belief and being taught that from a very, very early age, that as a man, it's okay to be violent. And then in the US, what makes us different is our access to weapons. And, you know, an AR-15 is an assault rifle. Like, this is a weapon designed for war. So you have access to high-powered, extremely efficient weapons, coupled with this value of like, it's okay for me to be violent. And, you know, when I'm angry, when I'm afraid, when I'm threatened, when, you know, when I'm scared, when I'm all these different things, violence is okay. And I think you put those two together and you have these situations.
I like what you brought about the fact where predominantly that's how little boys are raised, and it goes back to the home, to the parental role. And you know, with a lot of the issue, the societal problems and dilemmas and crisis, a lot of it really also boils down to the home. So that's a good point. So now they're proposing, there's all these solutions about like universal background check, arming teachers and increasing security in schools, so on and so forth. But it's not like it's only happening now, but it's so sad that really there's really nothing concrete that has been successful in really bringing this issue to, you know, to a halt, or at least to lessen the number, right?
Right.
When you were making this movie, Emil, was there one major goal that you're hoping the audience would take away from this film?
Yeah, the main goal was empathy. I wanted the rest of us. I wanted adults. The movie's not for kids. We have 20 kids in it, but it's not for kids. It's not intended for them at all. It's for adults to be able to feel what it would be like to be in one of these situations, whether you have children or not, whether your children are grown. Most of us, like everyone my age, we didn't go through drills. We didn't go through active shooter drills. 100% of the kids that I auditioned, so, you know, there's 20 kids in the movie. We auditioned many more. 100% of them, and we shot this film last year, 2019. 100% of these kids have gone through active shooter drills. So the fact that there are children going to schools, planning and training for the idea that someone could come into their classroom and kill them is so wrong. And I wanted as many adults as possible around the world to feel what it would be like to be the adult in the room and responsible for these lives, including your own, but for all of these little lives. And start there, because I do think before change can happen, you have to care, you have to empathize. And so you're not invested in something that you don't relate to. And so that was the goal, is like help people understand what this would feel like.
Thank you for actually creating this film, and, you know, from ideas, making it into reality, and to hopefully really touch a lot of the hearts and minds of not only the parents, but also importantly, the lawmakers, you know, out there, and really not have it as part of just one of their agenda, right? Not just one of their political agenda to rally your party or what have you, but really your film. Yeah, it's something that I think, you know, you don't really, it's one thing to read about it, and it's one thing to watch it and seem like you're there and feel what what the teacher especially was feeling at the moment. So spectacular work there, Emil. In closing, how can our audience reach you, and more importantly, how can our audience support you in this project?
Well, so I'm on Instagram. My personal account is Emil G80, and then my production company, where all the news about 123 and all future projects will be, is Waterlight Films on Instagram. Those are probably the two best places, and then also my website, which is just waterlightfilms.com. And then, yeah, I mean, just really with 123, the best way is just to share it. It'll be playing on HBO in April of next year, 2021. And like we've talked about, it's currently in contention for an Oscar. So we'll keep our fingers crossed and see how far that goes. But when it comes out on HBO, just watching it and sharing it, it's not the lightest movie, but I do think it's important. So, you know, that's probably the best way.
And really having a mindful discussion that hopefully just doesn't stop there, and have, you know, the right people lobby to the right rules and restrictions, you know, from gun control to mental health, to maybe even going to what is needed for parents to do, right? To your point, to make sure that, hey, there are other outlets out there to express emotion. So really great work there. I wasn't expecting when I clicked the link, I wasn't expecting at all.
Yeah.
And really, I was at the edge of my seat. So our audience would be in a treat to really support you in your project. So congratulations, and wishing you continued success, Emil.
Thanks so much,
for all the dreamers out there. Keep believing. You got this. Till next time.